Hello. Welcome back. This is the Truth Seeker 333. And this is a continuing series on the Council of the Gods. And right now we are in a study of the title L. And we are looking at a complete review of L in the Strong's Concordance. Reference H410. This is video part 2.4.2.7, and we are picking up at Psalm 68 verse 35, which reads, O God, thou art terrible out of thy holy places. The God of Israel is he that giveth strength and power unto his people. Blessed be God. Amen. And the section that I've highlighted is El Yisrael, but also I see that it also starts with O God, so we might want to look at the Hebrew on that. And then it ends with blessed be God. So three instances of the word God translated. But let's see how this is put together in the Hebrew. The God of Israel is El Yisrael. El Yisrael, okay? And there's the other word for God in this verse is Elohim, and so we have this compound El Yisrael, the God of Israel, and we also have Elohim used twice in this verse. So let's take a look at that Hebrew. Okay, and did I have the correct link on this here? Psalm 68:35, and it reads in the Hebrew Elohim. So the first part of that is Norah and Elohim. So we see that use of Elohim there, but we see it also ends with Elohim. Baruch Elohim, blessed be God. Baruch Elohim. And in the middle of them we have El Yisrael. Okay, so all these titles being synonymous with one another. You know, O God, you know, the God of Israel, and blessed be God. So that's how it looks in the Hebrew. All right, and so I guess what I'm getting at here is the usage of El, you know, as a basic title, God. And then we see this use of Elohim in the same verse, but it's referring to the same God, which is the God of Israel, El Yisrael, okay? So Elohim is equal to El Yisrael. Blessed be God, blessed be Elohim, it's equal to the God of Israel, okay? So it's equal to El, okay? These are not two separate gods. These are two different ways of addressing God. Okay, so moving on to Psalm 73, verse 11. it reads, "And they say, how doth God know? And is there knowledge in the Most High?" And in the Hebrew it is Icha Yada El. Icha Yada El. Okay, Yada is the word for know. And in the King James it says, "How doth God know?" And we also see in this verse the title Elyon in the same verse. So let's just take a look at that. We'll look at it. I have a note here to look at it in the net translation as well. So we will look at it in the net translation as well. First, we're going to look at it in the Hebrew. And they say, how doth God know? And is there knowledge in the Most High? So the title Most High on the end there, it says Be Elyon. So in Most High, Be Elyon, and we translate in the Most High, but within Most High, in or within Most High is what Be, the B at the front of it, signifies. So Be Elyon, which is in reference to El in this verse as well. So now let's just take a quick look at the net version translation. It's interesting translation. They say, how does God know what we do? Is the Most High aware of what goes on? ? So that's sort of kind of gives you an interesting look at some of the challenges of translation. This is obviously a paraphrase. And sometimes when you translate it literally, you're just not going to get the true understanding of the Hebrew. So I haven't studied this one, but I just thought that was interesting. So moving on to the next verse is Psalm verse 73, chapter 73, verse 17, which reads, "Until I went into the sanctuary of God, then I understood their end." And the highlighted portion is in the sanctuary of God, and the Hebrew is El Mikdashi El. So the first L, you'll note it has the three little dots under there, the Segol, which signifies unto, okay, or toward. The same characters as the title God, El, except you'll see that based on the context, also we have the vowel markings to signify, but based on the context, unto the sanctuary of El, God. Okay? And into, you could say into the sanctuary of God. So that this is simply the title El in this verse, and so real straightforward. So moving on to Psalm chapter 74, verse 8. They said in their hearts, let us destroy them together. They have burned up all the synagogues of God in the land. Okay, and the highlighted portion is all the synagogues of God. Okay, And in the Hebrew, again, we have these things that are kind of strung together with these dashes, okay? And this is the stress markings, but because they're strung together, I like to put it all together here. So, Chol Moadi El, okay? Chol Moadi El. And what's interesting is Chol, that means all, of course. Moadi is very similar to another word, which is Moadim. But Moadi is the times, okay? It's also in reference to the times and the seasons. It has also a reference to the stars in the sky and to the great clock in the sky, in a sense, okay? But in this context, it is also in reference to the times of worship, to the times of the synagogue, or to the times of the religious gathering, and so all the times of God. Okay, so when we translate it, we're translating all the synagogues of God, but the understanding is that it's a building or it's a gathering place where the righteous gather together at the specified times of worship, and that those areas had been destroyed by the wicked. So that's the I just wanted to point that out. I found it quite interesting in the Hebrew. And of course, we just have the title El in this verse, pretty straightforward. And then we have chapter 77, Psalm chapter 77, verse 9. Hath God forgotten to be gracious? Hath he in anger shut up his tender mercies? Selah. And the highlighted portion, hath God forgotten to be gracious? In the Hebrew, ha-shechach hanot el. Okay? Ha-shechach Chanot El. Okay. And then also note in my note the use of the tetragrammaton in chapter 77, verse 11, which is 2 verses from that. So basically, in context, El is being used interchangeably with the tetragrammaton here. And moving on to verse 13 of chapter 77. Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary. Who is so great a God as our God? So who, or we could say which, God is great as the God of creation? That's my translation. But basically, I'm translating Elohim as the God of creation. But in the Hebrew, Mi El Gadol Ki Elohim. Okay? So, which God? Mi El, which God? You can see the use of El as a generic word for God, also a generic title for God, and then Gadol, which is great, Ki, which is that which or as, and in this case, as Elohim, Ki Elohim. And so we have this phrase, Mi El, which God? Mi-el. And note the use of Elohim twice in this verse. Clearly, El is used of a God, which God. So in that sense, it could be a lowercase g. You could look at it as a lowercase g. Which God is great as our God, Ki Elohim. Okay, so that's something that's not in the Hebrew is small letters. You just know based on the context whether it is the God or a God. Okay. And let's see how we're doing on our time. We're good. 15 more minutes. Chapter 77, verse 14. Thou art the God that dost wonders. Thou hast declared thy strength among the people. And it's, you are the God. In the Hebrew, Atah Ha'el. Okay, Atah, you are, or thou art. In the King James, Ha is the, El, God. But Ha in this sense is distinctive, definite article of the one and only God. Ha'el. And my note says, note the use of the definite article directly after verse 13, which does not use the article. Okay, what am I saying there? Yeah, so the distinction is made between verse 13 and 14. Mi-el, which God? Ha-el, the God. Okay, all right. And so we move on to chapter 78 of Psalms, verse 7. That they might set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments. Amen. Amen. So the works of God, that's an interesting, because also here we have, it looks like we might have two uses of the word God in this verse, so we'll take a look at the Hebrew too. In the Hebrew, for the works of God, it is ma'ali el. Okay? And also there's the word Elohim. So that would be the other use of the title God, which you do not see in the English. But that is right here. Be Elohim, in God. Remember, be following in front of a word is in or within. And so we see that used in the same verse as the title El. Okay. Next verse. Psalm 78, verse 8. And might not be as their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation that set not their heart aright, and whose spirit was not steadfast with God. Okay? So the operative phase is with God or toward God. We can understand that also as toward God. And the Hebrew is et el. Et el. Okay? And we know by the context that this is talking about ha'el, but because it says, whose spirit was not steadfast, et el, with God. And so I just made a note, the Elohim is used two verses later in verse 10 of chapter 78. So it's the whole chapter there is going back and forth between Elohim and El. And in verse 18 of chapter 78 in the Psalms, it reads, "And they tempted God in their heart by asking meat for their lust." Okay, that sounds to me like a reference to the Torah, where Moses had the people out in the wilderness, and they were like, "We have no meat to eat," and then all the quail came. So this is a reference to that. The English is "and they tempted God," and the Hebrew is Vainasu El. Vainasu El. Okay, and also again, note the use of Elohim one verse later in verse 19. So moving on to verse 19, we see that use of Elohim. Chapter 78, verse 19. "Yea, they spake against God. They said, Can God furnish a table in the wilderness?" And the phrase is "can God." In the Hebrew is hayucho El. Hayucho El. Okay? And so it's got El, and then it also talks of Elohim in the same verse again. Again, just to continue to drive this point home, looking at it in the Hebrew, it says, "Yea, they spake against God," and note we see the prefix "ba," and I remember I had said that also means with or within, but in the context it can also mean against. Well, when we translate it into the English, so "be Elohim," against God, and then can God furnish, Hayucho El. Okay, so again, we're using Elohim here, we're using El here, and they are synonymous in the verse. And so moving on to chapter 78, verse 34. "When he slew them, then they sought him, and they returned and inquired early after God." The English highlighted it, "and they inquired early to or / after God." In the Hebrew, it is Veshcharu El. Veshcharu El. And also the use of Elohim in the next verse, right after the use of the word El in the previous verse, in chapter 8, verse 35. "And they remembered that God was their rock, and the high God their Redeemer." The highlighted English, "and God Most High," which is the El Elyon. The El Elyon. Now we're familiar with the compound El Elyon. In this particular verse, we are saying Va'el Elyon, and the Vav, in the beginning of this phrase is simply the word "and." So, and God. The El Elyon, and God Most High. And we're also seeing, again, the use of Elohim in the same verse. So this one we have El Elyon, the El Elyon. We also have Ki Elohim. So this is the Ki is translated that, so that God. Ki Elohim. We have Veyi Zecharu, which is when you see the U on the end, you know that's they, or it's plural. But this is and they remembered. Veyi Zecharu. Well, I'm kind of butchering it, but anyway, that's the word, and they remembered. And so we see all these titles for God in the same verse here. So Elohim, El, and Elyon. Well, this is a compound, El Elyon. Okay, let's see how much time we got. We got a little bit more time, maybe one more. So Psalm chapter 78, verse 41. Yea, they turned back and tempted God and limited the Holy One of Israel. And the English, and they tempted God. In the Hebrew, Veyi nasu el. Okay, so that was the same as up here, verse 18. So we see this theme, and they tempted God, and they tempted God, coming back again. V'yanasu el, and they tempted God. And also we see this phrase, the Holy One of Israel, which is Ukadesh Israel. Oh, I love that. I love that. Note the use of the Holy One of Israel in the same verse. Ukadesh Israel. The Holy One of Israel. So let's look at that in the Hebrew, and then we'll tie this up. So this is the word here, and you'll note the vav with the dot, which signifies the u sound. So u kadosh, or well, this is ukadosh. So according to the vowel markings, ukadosh, Yisrael. El, actually, it's almost like this is one whole phrase. El Ukodesh Yisrael. So this is almost like a compound phrase, like God, the Holy One of Israel, because the way it's set up in the Hebrew. So you can see how, when you translate things, when you read it in the Hebrew, you get a different sense of how these are connected together here. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up with that. And it's been a pleasure. Hopefully we continue to get through this here. We're leaving off on chapter 78, verse 41. Next time, we will begin at Psalm chapter 80, verse 10. All right. Well, God bless you all. Keep seeking truth, and may the Lord continue to guide us all, and bless us and prosper us all and heal us all and keep us safe. In Jesus, Yeshua's name, amen.